Have you ever found yourself caught in the whirlwind of fad diets and quick fixes, only to be left feeling defeated and disheartened when the results inevitably fade away? Why do some people seem to effortlessly maintain a healthy weight while still enjoying their favorite foods? Are you tired of yo-yo dieting and ready to ditch the endless cycle of restricted diets, discover the secret to achieving lasting weight loss results, and embrace a lifestyle that promotes well-being and health without sacrificing the foods you love? Join me after the intro for a conversation with a very special friend, with whom we will answer this and many more questions. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's start. Hi, I'm Rossana D, and this is Forgive and Thrive, a podcast where we explore what thriving in life means and how we can achieve it, irrespective of our past, current condition, and expectations that those around us or society in general may have. Let's go. Welcome to the Forgive and Thrive show. In a world where convenience often trumps consciousness, the scale of overweight and obesity-related issues continues to dip dangerously. Beyond mere numbers on a scale, being overweight carries a host of physical, emotional, and societal burden on all of us. Physically, the toll of excess weight manifests in many ways, from the increased risk of chronic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, to the strain on joints and muscles. Every extra pound exerts a toll on the body's delicate balance. Sleep apnea, fertile issues, and even certain cancers loom on the horizon for those of us grappling with obesity. But the ramifications extend far beyond. The emotional burden of carrying excess weight can be equally profound, often eroding self-esteem and fueling a relentless cycle of shame and self-doubt. From societal stigma to internalized narratives of unworthiness, the emotional toll of obesity leaves scars that are often invisible, but no less profound. And yet, despite knowing and acknowledging the toll of being overweight, stats show that as a society, we are getting bigger and heavier with time. So today we are going to peel back the layers of conventional weight loss wisdom and reveal the timeless truths that can make a difference. It's not about crash diets or punishing workouts. It's about embracing a holistic approach that nourishes our body, mind, and spirit. And we dive into this crucially important topic in a conversation with our guest, Megan Gaul. Megan is an educator-turned-coach from Staten Island, New York. She embarked on her own 100 pounds weight loss journey in 2018. While keeping at that weight off ever since, she has worked hard to build and maintain strong boundaries to keep out diet industry jargon and fear-based tactics. She forged a unique way to her healthy lifestyle, and food freedom was the most important part of that path. Hi, Megan. Welcome to the Forgive and Try show. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Me too, because I'm really eager to have this conversation with you. And as we were just mentioning a moment ago, I'm really willing to know and eager to know how you actually managed to lose 100 pounds. I think that's a question that many of our listeners perhaps have. But before going into that, I would like to start with you. And if you can tell us a little bit about your journey, the before and what brought you to embrace that journey.
Great question. So my name is Megan, as we said before. I think what brought me to start making changes this most recent time, right? Because we all want to make changes. At any point in our adulthood, there's something looming that we want to work on. For me, when health and weight and eating all came to a head was in this 2017, 2018 space. And it didn't come to a head because, like a lot of people I talk to, it comes to a head because they see a picture of themselves and they don't recognize themselves and they're larger than they were. And that makes them feel all that shame that's external, but they're feeling it, deeply inside. A lot of other people might get news from their doctor, you really need to lose weight. This problem is on the horizon. As you were saying, this problem is coming up. Your family history dictates that you need to work on this right now. That brings up a lot of fear. For me, it was slightly different. I started making changes because I was seeing a behavior that made me feel so ashamed, so unlike myself, so unlike the other people in my circle, that I wanted to get out of that cycle of doing that behavior. And for me, at that time, I was working full time and I was seeing myself eating every day huge lunches and huge dinners for hours at a time, trying to forget about the stress of work. I'll give you an example. In my workday, I had 2 hours in the middle. It was a split shift. And I would go to a fast food place and I would order enough food to get me through 2 hours so that I could eat the whole time. And that was a behavior that I didn't really see the root of. It slowly grew over time, and I didn't really understand where it was coming from. And what I eventually learned was it was very rooted in my desire to forget about the stress that I was putting myself under at work. I was exhausting myself, feeling like I had to go through all these hard emotions at work, the stress of pleasing, customers or a boss or the people I was managing. I was dealing with that by going to a restaurant and just eating to forget about what I was about to go back to. I was in that numbing out place. So that behavior was a big part of me reaching 230, 240 pounds. But it was interesting that I didn't see the weight as the biggest problem at that point. I saw that behavior. I was eating huge amounts and feeling guilty right afterwards every day. It was just an exhausting circle that felt like normal adults don't go through this. And I know now that there are other people that really struggle with that kind of behavior. But I felt very alone at that time. So that was what brought me to start working on my eating behaviors. And I got a little help. I went to a cognitive behavioral therapist. And the big skill that I learned that helped me start moving towards the 100-pound weight loss was, one, that I could make a small change and stick to it. And two, that I could start looking at my thoughts and emotions more neutrally and not having to dull them down with food, which is what I was doing. So in a nutshell, starting to have an external person help me see those thoughts and emotions from the outside, and having that person also really helpfully prompt me with some helpful actions, which were, what if you, drank an extra glass of water a day? What if you started journaling your food? Those prompts to action really helped me focus on doing the things rather than just getting really wrapped up in the emotions and the diet industry kind of idea of what losing weight really looks like. So I would have to say I really focused on actions first rather than an outcome of losing weight. And I think that did work in my favor. And I think that's when we get really attached to the emotion of losing weight, it really gums up the works of us doing the actions that will slowly get us there over time.
I absolutely love what you are saying here. And there are two aspects that caught my attention. One is the plan, the action. And very often when it comes to actions, we tend to go in short-term, quick fix, which could be counterproductive. And the other is what you mentioned at the beginning, that might not have been your story, but a lot of us know about the problems related to extra weight, and yet we don't make the connection. We ignore whatever the doctors are telling us, just that quick fix with food.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, how can we reframe in our mind the fact that in order to have a long-term result, we cannot really go for the quick fix?
Yeah.
I know that this is something that I struggle. I struggle really because quick fix means, you have, 10 pounds reduction in your weight over a week. Shocking, but you can see the result, but in reality, it doesn't happen, no? In reality, you have 10 pounds over 2 months or 3 months, if you're lucky. And that sounds like a very long period of time to stick to a diet or a regime, you know?
I love that because it feels like, how can I wait that long for this result that is so important, right? Like how could I wait? It's urgent. It's urgent right now. The health is a problem right now. That's the story that happens in our heads because it feels very real. The doctor is telling us a lot of, things that we read in magazines, on social media, in the news. A lot of that is very fear-based. You must do it now. And the way I reframe that is looking logically at the time that it takes in the short-term quick fix versus the long-term solution. The short-term quick fix is what creates the yo-yo cycle of regain. So it only looks short-term on the surface, but really it makes the time so long because you make progress and then you go back, and you make progress and then you go back. And every time you do that, it's harder to then restart. So what people see is that if they try to adopt those really fast habits, some examples are like, I now go to the gym an hour a day, 7 days a week, like maybe someone says that to themselves. They do that to lose some weight fast, right? They do that to lose 10 pounds in a week. Then the next week, when their work is slightly busier, or they have a family member that needs caretaking, or they have a vacation coming up, all those reasons that 7-day gym habit was not sustainable come to a head. And then whatever that person did to lose weight is now not happening. So the weight comes back. And so the short-term quick fix makes it longer, and it makes you go backwards. That's what I always come back to. And it's really hard to wait when you're doing the small changes because we're wrapped up in this uncertainty of whether it will work or not. If I'm working for 4 weeks on just 2 small habits, like maybe I'm journaling my food and I'm drinking an extra glass of water a day, how do I know this is going to work? So we have this multi-week period of uncertainty, and people really don't like uncertainty at all. We have a hard time waiting for those results. But if that person can do the food journaling and the walk and the water, even when the stressful week comes up, even when they have to take care of their family member, even when they're going on vacation, if they can do those new habits that they have, they're not moving backwards, they're moving forwards. And so they've moved much further than that first person. And another way that I kind of conceive of this and helps me like reframe always towards the long-term view is that for those of us, like maybe me and you, who we turn to food in stressful situations, that's our old habits, and every so often they bubble back up, right? That's kind of our default. So if we really spend a lot of time listening to the stressful urgency of, you must lose this weight now, you must lose it now, this is very important to do fast, what is that going to do to our stress levels? It's going to raise them up. And what do we like to do to handle those higher stress levels? We like to retreat, and we like to go back to what calms us down, which a lot of us really rely on food to bring us back down to emotional regulation. We're all working to get out of that, but that's our default. So listening to that fear-based messaging can really put us in that stressful place that makes the old habits bubble back up. So that's another reason that I always like to take the slow approach, because it's kinder and it's a calmer place to make changes from what you actually want for yourself long term, rather than that stressful self that you have saying, you got to make the changes now. That doesn't tend to last as much as we want it to.
Absolutely. Staying on the topic of the quick fixes, when I was growing up, the quick fixes were fat diets, detox diet, whatever the latest magazine was proposing. In the last perhaps 2, 3, 4 years, there have been some changes on that horizon, with some medications that have come on the market, like, for example, Ozempic, Wegovy, and we hear about many celebrities, for example, that have gone that route. Now, there might be some evidence that they may help with weight loss. However, there are side effects that are non-negligible. The cost, the financial cost, again, is non-negligible. We don't know exactly the long-term effects of these medications. So I'm puzzled. What are your thoughts about it?
When we all started talking about Ozempic and Mounjaro and Wegovy, it really reminded me of the debate around bariatric surgery. It's a similar topic and a similar debate because it is very tempting to look at it as the solution, where really it's just a way to make the environment where you're making changes easier, right? So like bariatric surgery or like the gastric sleeve, like you can't eat as much as you did before because it's physically dangerous, physically uncomfortable. And so what it does is it forces you to make the change of eating less, right? Similar to the GLP-1s, these new medications, many of them work by working on the appetite, right? They work on your mood for food, the hormones around you wanting to eat food. It reduces that, having the result of you eating less. So what they don't do is fix the I'm stressed and I go to food issue, right? You can still kind of get involved in that old habit, even with these new tools. So I think these tools can be really helpful for certain people where it is more urgent than for other people to get something started, but they're not the solution because those people are going to have to learn anyway to set themselves up to eat slightly less than they were before, to set themselves up to deal with stress in a non-food related way and to stick to those changes even when life gets really stressful. For me, I personally, because I'm not a doctor, nutritionist, dietitian, or scientist, I am, as a person, very reluctant to use a tool when I'm going to have to do the thing anyway, especially a tool that may have very serious, side effects that we don't know about much in the future. Like you were saying, the long-term effects of them, that's not completely known yet. The short-term side effects, as you mentioned, they're not negligible. They definitely have an effect on many people. They impact your life, similar to bariatric surgery or other kinds of surgeries that adjust your ability to eat more. Like those definitely have complication risks and everything. So my thought as a person is if those have those risks and they don't eliminate the need to work on those habits, like dealing with stress without food, preparing my meals ahead of time, knowing what I'm going to enjoy, then I might as well work on those things and see where it gets me. And I think for many of us, we have the time to be intentional about working on those skills first. So yeah, that's kind of how I view it. It's a tool, but it's not the answer. And for some people, it can be really helpful to get them started.
I totally agree with this. And in fact, I would like to take it one step further, talking about the pressure that many of us are under. So societal pressure, for example, that could be related to our body image, how we look like in the social media age, but also the pressure that comes from big food, big pharma,
Mm-hmm.
the making decisions that are healthy and that really help us on the long term. It becomes very difficult. You go shopping and you find everything that you shouldn't really put on your trolley right there.
Yes.
It's typically at hand level.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that is nice for you to have at home is difficult to reach. These big industries are kind of fighting us every single day. So
Oh, yeah.
there is the internal emotional distress that you mentioned earlier. There is the societal pressure. And there is the pressure that comes from the availability, for example, of all the food, but also of all these medications and these quick fixes from Big Pharma.
Oh, 100%. What you said about the unhelpful foods being right at eye level, that really is very true when you're in the grocery store. And the other piece, I'll have to ask you if it's like this in the UK, but in the US, I think there's such a culture of work until you're dead. Like work until you have proven to everyone that you've put in an 80-hour work week. There's a lot of pressure to make sure you have the income to support your household. All of that pressure builds on someone so that they have so little time to choose the grocery store foods that would help them. So they are kind of pushed towards the really helpful, the convenience foods, the quick snacks, the ordering takeout, getting delivery. There's such a pressure to put all of our time towards work and our external roles, and very little support in putting the necessary time to preparing meals from, home. There's so little support in doing that for ourselves, both in a literal sense and also kind of in a social pressure sense. I think there's a lot of people who look at folks who kind of prepare all their meals on the weekend. They're like, oh, I could never do that. I work for a living. And I think that's a kind of a real pressure that we work against. There's this need to put all of our external time towards work. And I really see people grinding themselves to the bone to do that and feeling unable to take 10 minutes to prepare their lunch for the next day. And that's not really a them problem. It's this cloud of, if you're not putting this towards work and other people, it's not worthy time. You shouldn't be choosing to take that 10 minutes for yourself, even though we know logically, if we step back, we're going to give 50% more at work if we're well fed, well rested, and we have enough water to help ourselves, just be hydrated. I think we know logically that that's true, but it's very hard to take that time because we don't see other people doing it. We see other people working themselves to the bone. Is that an issue in the UK that you're seeing grow now?
Definitely growing. There are more people now going into takeaways, everything that is as convenient as it can possibly be. This was less perhaps a few years ago, but definitely as a society, I think we are going in that direction. And you can see that there is a growing market, industries and, delivering food, for example.
I think the pandemic helped with that a lot.
Exactly. And now there are so many, you just download their app and you can have your favorite pizza or your favorite, I don't know, burger delivered without any hassle. So that's, I guess, it is a big issue. So how can we resist? What sort of strategies we can put in place to help us resist the urge?
I love this. So I really think that there are so many small changes that you can make that can help in this area. And the key to knowing which small changes to make is to really know yourself and what you're willing to do, like we were talking about before. What is a step that feels like you're willing to do that even when your work week is crazy, even when you have real stress coming down the pike? So for me, that first habit, the first two habits were drinking a little more water and journaling my food. And what the food journaling has really done for me, and I still do it daily to this day, is it just helps me acknowledge what I have fed myself with for the day. Some days look on paper much better than others. The habit of food journaling doesn't mean I don't have days where I'm eating, 2 restaurant meals. It doesn't mean that I don't have days where I'm eating things that don't really serve my body well. But what it does do is it's a way to always have a tether back to my long-term goal. Every day I am honest about what I chose And I acknowledge to myself, I can choose this way tomorrow. I can choose differently tomorrow, but I always am aware of it. So I think awareness is the first big step that many folks resist. I think there's a lot of resistance to acknowledging what we choose because it's not always pretty. I did go to work today and there were donuts on the table and I did have two when I really meant to have one. Sometimes it's hard to write that down and face it. But if you do, and if you take that step, it just brings it out all into the open. And it's so much easier to make a change when you know what's happening now and you accept it. I think you can make changes from a more kind place when you fully acknowledge where you are now, what your habits are now, and what you would like to change. So some ways that are more specific to, as you were saying, resist the kind of the social pressure of the just the amounts of food that are around us that work against our weight management goals. Get really comfortable with having most meals from home is a big one. It can have a really big impact on your overall intake just because of the fact that we don't know how much oil is in any given takeaway that you get or how much butter that they put in that mac and cheese. There's a lot of hidden energy that we consume when we have those foods outside the home. So any way that you can know how many meals you're having out of the home now and make a small improvement, that's a big impact on your weight and health over time. So some ways I really like to do that is just build up a repertoire of very easy home meals. They don't have to be overcomplicated. They don't have to be perfect. They just have to be at home. So any way you can make that easier on yourself. I really like to tell people if they're not cooking and they want to, start buying pre-chopped veggies because that's one reason that you don't want to cook at home. You don't want to spend all the time chopping the vegetables. Now in the United States, in the grocery store, they have a whole section of pre-chopped fresh vegetables. I know it seems like it costs a little more, but it's going to be cheaper than the takeaway. So go for it if it'll help you have a few more meals at home. Another one is learning how to use frozen and, shelf stable goods, especially when you're first starting to cook more at home. There's a lot of annoyance because you're wasting food, food is going bad, you didn't use it. So any way you can use frozen vegetables, shelf stable canned goods, and learn to cook with those, you reduce that stress of having things go bad in the house. And also they're often fast. So those are some tips that I say help people start cooking more at home and avoiding those kind of 6 nights a week, 7 nights a week takeaways.
Fantastic. And one of the issues, and that goes back to the emotional, I suppose, are the triggers. People like myself, whenever there is a trigger, I tend to go to the fridge. How can we manage those triggers in a way that is not food related?
There are short-term help. It's kind of like the pills that help in the moment and the pills that help that you take every day, that kind of thing. So when you think about the things that help in the moment, having a list of 3 to 5 actions that you can do first. So it doesn't mean that you will always resist going to food, but you have a list of things that you are saying to yourself, these are actions that you can do when you feel uncomfortable. These are calming, comforting actions for you. So for me on that list is always like a puzzle, something physical I can do with my hands that doesn't really involve much thinking, just, physical. If it's available to you, a short walk outside, messaging a friend just to catch up, messaging a sister, a family member, a loved one, just to say, hey, how was your day? It's a physical action. You're typing on your phone and you're reaching out to connect with someone, which is absolutely a way to address uncertainty and stress in the moment. Other ones that are on my list, doing a stretch. So like a 2-minute or a 5-minute stretch. Some people love, me included, mindfulness meditations or breathing exercises or grounding. And the reason I like all of those is because they're also ways to regulate your nervous system. So when you have that urge for food in response to stress, it's usually in relation to, like, we feel something in our body not regulated, right? If we're having those emotions, we can feel it in our throat, or we can feel it in the pit of our stomach, or maybe our head is buzzing. There's something physical happening. So a deep breathing exercise or a grounding exercise where you're noticing the physical sensations in your body are all ways to address that nervous system dysregulation. And they also feel calming. Many times they feel physically calming. So many people want to address stress eating, but they never make that list for themselves. And so when the time comes up, they don't have anything to go to. So first step, having that list is a great tool, and it can really reduce the amount of times that you do go to food for stress, and it inserts time between when you feel that urge to eat and when you actually eat. So time is like healing all wounds there. Like, the more you can widen that time, the more you have the space to make a different choice if you feel you would like to. So that's kind of my in the moment solution to practice. And the long-term habits and practices that can help are all about reducing the chronic stress. So for me, that looks like walking daily, having a meditation practice, even if it's just 5 minutes. For some people, they love exercise to reduce chronic stress. For other people, it's making sure they see someone every day or hang out with someone every day. Some of us are very isolated. So it takes constant proactive work to make sure they're staying in social connection with people. So those are some long-term methods to reduce that chronic stress and make those short-term instances less frequent over time.
You mentioned a couple of times phoning or texting friends and family, and having people around. Now you mentioned and not being isolated. What is the role of people, or creating a support system around you to help you with maintaining healthy habits and achieving those goals? Because very often when we are together with others, I would argue that perhaps 80-90% of the times is around the table. So it's around food. So how can you, on one end, create that support system, on the other, have healthy boundaries and say, well, thank you very much, but
no thanks.
Thank you, exactly.
Yes. Oh, so this is a big topic because on one hand, we hear a lot of resist the food pushers, resist the people who are going to tell you what to eat. And then on the other hand, we hear community and support is so helpful, and my partner is not supporting me, and it makes it so much harder. So there's this kind of two sides to it. The way I, in my personal journey, navigated this was, one, being very clear about what I expected of myself, independent of what other people were doing or had opinions about. So I was very adamant that, I had my habits to track and I was responsible for my results, and I didn't need anyone's support to do it. I could do it. Like, that was my approach at first. And I think it helped me a little bit because it made me self-reliant. It helped me be very clear with other people when I was in situations where there was a lot of food, there were people offering food, all of that. Some of the ways that self-reliance helped was, before going to a party or before going to a gathering, I knew how I wanted to handle it already. I had thought out, all right, there's probably going to be hors d'oeuvres there. There will probably be a dessert. People are going to be ordering drinks and an entree or a buffet or something. And so before going, I would align with myself, even jot down a plan, 2 drinks, skip the appetizers, enjoy the entree. Once I'm done with my drinks, order seltzers. Like, I kind of had a rough, self-reliant plan before going in. And that knowledge really helped me, and actually forced me, to practice a really kind no thank you, which a lot of people, it's very uncomfortable. And it was uncomfortable for me at first. But having the knowledge that my plan was solid and I wasn't harming anyone by sticking to what I wanted to enjoy really helped. Having those statements like, not tonight, but I can't wait to see what you think of it, or I'd love to try a bite, but you order it, you enjoy it. Having those statements that come from the heart, are kind, and are really honest, and are really clear that no, thank you. That's a really important thing, kind of tool to have when you're navigating those environments that involve food and the connection. And I think the other piece of that also is it's really going and getting clear on what you want out of the social connection, right? Like a lot of us, if we're in that diet mentality, we get over focused on the food, what I'm going to have, what I'm going to skip, what I'm missing out on. But we forget that the whole point of us going out is to enjoy life and maintain and strengthen our connections with our loved ones, right? We forget that we're there to catch up with our friends, to ask our brother how he's doing with his new job. Like, we forget that we're there to enrich our life. And calories don't really have a huge part of that most of the time. Often it's just a little sprinkle of fun on the whole purpose of the get together. So that's always helpful. I do remember last year I went on a weekend trip with my partner, and I made a list before I went of all the things I wanted to do that had nothing to do with trying the new foods that would be there. I put down, I want to make sure we take pictures every single day. I want to make sure we have downtime on the beach to read together. I want to make sure we do something historical. I wrote down all the things that I wanted to get out of that trip that had nothing to do with food or drink. And it was hard at first because as a foodie, I'm always like, I want to try this barbecue and this new restaurant and this dessert. But it was such a worthy exercise because it helped me refocus on what's really important when I go there.
Absolutely. And yeah, when we are around people, especially if we are on a diet, we tend to go full on, all or nothing, right? And we have, as you said, this idea of the food always in front of us, and we struggle to detach ourselves from that topic and enjoy everything else. So thank you very much for stressing that point. I don't know if it was your experience, but you certainly mentioned at the beginning the yo-yo dieting. So many people go from one diet to another, and they experience obstacles and setbacks, and sometimes it's really, really tough. What sort of strategies do you have to overcome those obstacles and setbacks and continue on your weight loss journey?
So for many people, the setback is weight regain, right? Which feels very scary. And I have experienced that, I would say, once in a big way and a few times in a small way. What I've learned through those experiences is the faster we can accept where we are right now and let go of the past, the easier the path forward will be, and the faster we'll get to a place where we feel good about what we're doing. And that's much easier said than done. But I think the strategy there is to step back and to force a perspective, a wider perspective of your life on yourself, and to say, let's pause here. Am I still worthy at this weight? Do I still deserve good habits? Do I still deserve water every day? Do I still deserve 3 solid meals, including really good vitamins and minerals? Do I still deserve good protein to help my muscles recover and grow? Do I still deserve calcium and iron and good stuff? And I think the only answer there is yes, isn't it? Everyone deserves those things. And it's hard when you're in that place where you're like, I can't believe I let this happen again. What's wrong with me? How did I get back here? If only I could be how I was before. If only I could do the same things I did before. And all that past focus is like energy right out the window, because you can't do anything about that. There's no power you have there. All of your power, I try to remember, is right here, right now. And there are actions I can take today so that in a month, I'm looking back and saying, I'm so glad I did those things. I think the acceptance and the refocusing on the actions I can do today and making them actions out of self-love that's unconditional is kind of how I get out of that, how I move forward. That takes practice. That's really the only thing that will allow you to get better at that over time, is when it's necessary, looking at that time period as this is an opportunity to practice this skill of giving myself acceptance and unconditional self-love, and reminding myself that I am worthy of the good actions that I want to do today. Giving myself 3 good meals, giving myself water, moving a little bit, all that. Easier said than done, but it's almost like a call to practice. Like, no matter what the outcome is, it's a call to practice.
I absolutely love what you're saying here, because many of us are actually on a sort of auto self-sabotage mode 24/7, right? And we tell our mind with our actions that we cannot trust ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very, very hard, because when we sort of identify with someone that we cannot trust, then obviously it's tougher to embrace change, positive change. And you mentioned releasing and letting go, whatever we have done. And for me, that is a very important aspect, and it's a core part of this podcast. And it's really that releasing, and it's not just releasing the action that didn't serve us, but very often is releasing the emotions that we attach to that action, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, breaking that trust, that promise that we make to ourselves. So I'm going to stick to this diet regime, and I'm not going to make any meal that will put me a kilo on in just 1 second. But then we inevitably do, and we create all these emotions. So how do we release these emotions, refocus, and go back on the right path? And
Ooh.
line with Forgive and Thrive, do you think that forgiveness, self-forgiveness, as that act of accepting what happened and giving ourselves the permission to move forward, is a possible tool in our toolbox to thrive again as a fitter and healthier version of ourselves?
I think that's great. I think there's 2 ways I would do that. And I think one of them is getting those emotions into a place where we can see them and feel them. So one very straightforward way to practice that is a brain dump journal exercise. So setting the timer for 5 or 10 minutes, getting a bunch of sheets of paper and getting everything out, stream of consciousness, furiously if needed, onto the paper. Anything that you're worried about, anything that you're angry about that happened in the past, anything you're scared about that will happen in the future, anything that comes to mind, physically writing it out. I think that is a help to accomplish that acceptance and forgiveness kind of goal that we all have. So that is a helpful strategy. And I think another piece of that I've really been practicing over the past few years is getting out of the head and feeling where the emotion is in the body, because we've just made up the story in our head. Those thoughts have come up many, many times, and they're not necessarily all true, but there is a feeling that's happening in our body, and that is going to pass. And so getting very clear about where it's happening in the body, in the neck, in the throat, in the chest, in the stomach, in the head, and sitting with that without scrolling on the phone or distracting yourself, but just sitting with it, is another really important piece to letting those emotions pass by without us getting mad at them. Or if we do get mad at them, seeing that as another emotion that will pass too. So I think those two are really helpful. They don't solve everything right away, but indulging in the practice of it is definitely going to help more than harm. And I think the second piece of that is once you put in a good effort with that, refocusing on an action that feels 100% possible right now and giving yourself evidence, giving that brain the evidence it craves that you can indeed do a thing towards your goal. You can, and for me, that's often writing something in my food journal or chopping a vegetable for the next day or going for a walk, something tangible that you can then turn back to your brain and say, I am working towards this. The past doesn't matter right now. I'm taking action towards it.
Amen. And with that, I would like to come back on you before we close. Is there anything that you are working on or planning for this year that you would like to share with us?
Oh, sure. So I've recently started and I'm growing a meal planning club. And this is free to join. But what it does is it helps gives you a time for this very important action that you can do each week. And it's putting together a menu for yourself for the next week. So we do it together over 30 minutes in an Instagram live. So this is something new that I've built because it's a space that a lot of people want to save for themselves, but don't have the place in their week to do it. So here's a place in your week to do it if you would like. And to join that, you would just go to partakemealplanning.com/join the club.
Fantastic. And we will put the link in the description of today's episode so everyone will find you. Megan, very final question. If there was one take-home message that you would love everybody to remember from this conversation, what that would be?
That would be, if you are looking to make a big change, it doesn't mean that it all has to happen right at the beginning. Please know that you are working towards that change, even with a small change to your routine at the very beginning of your journey. No matter how small that looks right now, if it's moving you towards your goal, you have started, and you do not need to get down on yourself for not making a huge change right now. You can definitely move towards your goal by making a small change. And that is what I did, and I will stand by it for everyone. Don't make a change that you feel like you can't accomplish. Don't make that promise to yourself if you feel like you're going to, go back on it. Make something that you are 95% to 100% certain you have the power to do today. Keep it in your wheelhouse and take that action.
Well, as we reach the end of this episode, we are all reminded that slow and steady win the race. Losing a significant amount of extra weight is hardly an easy walk in the park. It requires changing our lifestyle, ditching old habits, embracing new ones, and picking ourselves up at the first obstacle when the temptation to give up is stronger than the will to get healthier. And if you found yourself ever in this situation, I know I have multiple times, in fact, then remember what Michael Jordan said: obstacles don't have to stop you. If you run into a wall, don't turn around and give up. Figure out how to climb it, go through it, or work around it. Well, I might just make a big poster of this one and put on my desk. Megan, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and sharing so much about yourself, your story, your journey, and what you do for others. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, we would love to know what you think about this topic. Are you or someone you know perhaps struggling with losing a significant amount of weight? If so, let us know about your journey. Are there challenges that perhaps you are facing right now? If so, I'm sure that you will find this episode very inspiring to reposition yourself in a more empowered path. But if you need extra help, don't forget to check Megan's website, her work, and social media. You will find all the links in the description of today's episode. Join me next time when we will continue exploring inspiring and challenging situations. Because remember, we are together in this journey. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this content, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to hit the notification bell and like this video. See you on the next one.